Join me as I try to break down the difference between power and energy in solar energy. Let's see if I can make it simple enough for anyone to understand. When we talk about solar energy, we often throw around two terms, power and energy. But what do they really mean, and why is it so important to understand the difference between them? Well, in the context of solar energy, power and energy are two distinct concepts that are often confused with each other. But in order to make informed decisions about our energy systems, we need to get a clear understanding of what each of these terms represents. One of the most common mistakes people make when discussing solar energy is confusing power and energy. We've all heard it before. Someone says, "My solar panel produces 500 watts of energy." But that's not entirely accurate. What they really mean is that their solar panel produces 500 watts of power. But what's the difference, and why does it matter? The truth is, if you don't understand the difference between power and energy, you might end up making poor decisions about your solar energy system. For example, you might think you need a bigger system than you actually do, or worse, you might think your system is performing better than it actually is. This confusion is especially prevalent in the solar industry because the terms power and energy are often used interchangeably. But in reality, they represent two different physical quantities. Power refers to the rate at which energy is generated or consumed. It's like the speed at which you're filling up a tank. Energy, on the other hand, is the total amount of work that can be done. It's like the total amount of fuel in the tank. This misunderstanding can lead to some pretty big consequences. For instance, if you're trying to decide between two different solar panels, one that produces 300 watts of power and another that produces 500 watts of power, you might think the latter is the better option. But what if the 300-watt panel is more efficient and produces more energy over the course of a day? You'd be making a decision based on the wrong criteria. That's why it's so important to understand the difference between power and energy. So, let's dive a bit deeper into the definitions of power and energy. Power, as I mentioned earlier, is the rate at which energy is generated or consumed. It's usually measured in watts. Energy, on the other hand, is the total amount of work that can be done. It's usually measured in watt-hours or kilowatt-hours. To illustrate the difference, think of a sink filling up with water. The flow rate of the water is like power, it's the rate at which the sink is filling up. The total amount of water in the sink is like energy, it's the total amount of water that's accumulated. Let's take another example. Imagine you have a 100-watt light bulb that you want to run for 10 hours. In this case, the power is 100 watts, but the energy is 1 kilowatt-hour. That's the total amount of energy required to run the light bulb for 10 hours. See how these two concepts are related but distinct? Okay, so now that we have a better understanding of power and energy, let's talk about how they interact in solar setups. Here's the key insight: power determines how fast your solar panel produces energy, while energy determines how much total energy your system can produce over a given period of time. So, if you have a high-power solar panel, it might produce a lot of energy in a short amount of time, but it might not produce as much energy overall as a lower-power panel that runs for a longer period. This distinction has some pretty important practical implications. For instance, if you live in an area with a lot of shading or limited sunlight, you might want to prioritize energy production over power output. On the other hand, if you have a lot of direct sunlight, you might want to prioritize power output. So, to recap, power and energy are two distinct concepts that are often confused with each other. Power refers to the rate at which energy is generated or consumed, while energy refers to the total amount of work that can be done. Understanding the difference between these two concepts is critical for making informed decisions about our solar energy systems. Thanks for watching, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on solar energy in the comments below. If you want to learn more about related topics, be sure to check out my next video.